Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to High Strangeness. I'm Tony, and I'm your host, and this is the place where we talk about all things strange and unexpected in our reality. In today's episode, we're going to dive into something that happens on a regular basis and is often part of major news stories, but people know very little about it. In recent years, there's been huge national stories like the story of Gabby Petito, who went missing. It's a 22-year-old young lady who was later found murdered. The University of Idaho massacre with Brian Kohlberger, who was alleged to kill 4 college students in their dorm or their apartment. There's also items and news out there like the Also mudslide, which happened in Washington State, where a whole neighborhood was covered by a partially collapsed mountain that killed 43 people, and there were many days to weeks where there was rescue and recovery occurring in that scenario. The other thing that we're familiar with is there's an influx of drugs all over the country through our borders and things like that. And then, of course, big stories like the 9/11 that occurred and the collapsing of buildings and things like that. So with all these terrible things that have happened and do happen all the time, there's a segment of our law enforcement and rescue personnel that most of us know very little about. We have unsung heroes doing what only they can do. And so these are our tactical and emergency and rescue dogs. Some of the biggest news stories of unfortune that show up on our TV screens and our news feeds have these amazing animals participating to help us. But the question is, what do we really know about them? Where do they come from? Where do they go after they perform these tasks? Who trains them? And where do they get trained? So I'm excited because we're going to find out a little bit about that today. There is an amazing company in North Carolina called the Highland K9 Training Center. And today I'm lucky to have the owner and president of that company, Jason Perguson. Did I say your last name correct, Jason?
Nailed it.
Perfect. Welcome, Jason. So glad to have you on today. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome.
Always good times to talk about the dogs. So.
Absolutely. So how's the business going these days? Busy or what?
We're always busy. Our summer months oftentimes are a little busier than other times of the year, but we really don't typically have a slow time or a slow period during the year.
Yeah, I would imagine it's a need that's year-round, so that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. I want to ask you, before we get into talking about all of this, if you could spend just a few minutes telling us a little bit about you. I'd like to know a little bit about your background, your experience, what got you into this area, and then at the tail end of some of that, maybe share a little bit or spotlight some of your staff that help you do all the wonderful things that you guys are doing right now. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Awesome.
as you mentioned, we're in North Carolina. I was born and raised in North Carolina. I've been around dogs pretty much all my life. Got into dogs really early on in my life. Started working with dogs at a pretty young age. Got into law enforcement at a young age. As soon as I turned 21. I was in law enforcement only about 9 months and was selected to be a police dog handler for our department. At the time, our agency didn't have any dogs. They had a bit of a bad taste in their mouth. They'd had some bad experiences with previous police dogs, and they decided they wanted to take a go at it again, and I was actually selected to be that handler. Ended up going through a school. Things went exceptionally well, better than even I could have expected them to go. We ended up growing that particular dog team over the years. Ended up having a number of dogs. I then moved into a more of a trainer role and a supervisory role in addition to continuing to work a dog. Worked my first dog for right around 10 years. I got him when he was 2, retired him when he was 12. So he ended up living to be 17. I got a second dog and started with that dog, and then I moved out of law enforcement, handed that dog over to its new handler, and I went into training full time. So I went to work for another company here in North Carolina. I did that for a little over a year, and my wife and I decided that we thought we could build a better widget, and so we started our own business called Highland K9 Training. We're in the foothills of North Carolina, about an hour north of Charlotte, and we started the business. It's 2005 technically, so officially 06, so late 05, early 06. So we've been here 18 years. Still growing, still training all sorts of dogs, and we've got a special place in our heart for law enforcement and working dog division, just because my wife and I both have a pretty strong law enforcement background. So
that's pretty cool. So would it be fair to say that you've always loved dogs, but it wasn't necessarily something you said as a young person, I'm going to do that? It just kind of developed and evolved through your law enforcement and the responsibilities you had there. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. No, as early on, I was going to be a fighter pilot. Chuck Yeager was my idol when I was a kid. I had no aspirations of training dogs for a living. Didn't even know that was a career field. They never covered that one in career day. So I wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, as we get into this conversation, I always remember seeing these dogs at the corner of a lot of these news stories. And I always wonder for just a minute, wow, I wonder what the training process is. I wonder a lot of things, which we'll get into those questions. But oftentimes the rest of the story overtakes it, right? And then you stop thinking about it. So when I ran across your business and your school, I thought to myself, I personally want to know more about it, and I think other people would love to understand it and have you share some of that. So thank you for being on. I think one of the first questions that I have is, what are all the different kinds of dogs that come out of your program? So I noticed on your website there's a number of different types of dogs. Could you go into that for us?
Yeah, so our business is pretty multifaceted. We've got 4 major divisions of our company that have developed over the years. We've got our pet dog side of the house, right? So people are pretty familiar with that. Most Americans have a dog, so they're familiar with pet dog training in some capacity. We have our service dog division, so that part of the company trains dogs specifically for individuals with disabilities. We do a lot of different types of service dogs, but we focus a lot on placing dogs with individuals affected by autism spectrum disorders. That's something we've been doing pretty regularly since 2009. Our probably third division is our education and school division, where we teach other people how to become professional dog trainers. We've got a variety of programs. We've got 3 campuses across the U.S. So we've got a lot of educational programs going on for those who want to be more involved with dogs and do it professionally as a career. And then our working dog division trains all sorts of dogs. We talk about police dogs. Most people have visions of pointy-eared Malinois and German Shepherds that find drugs, but our working dog division covers a lot more than that. We've trained some dogs to do some pretty strange things over the years in the working dog division. Not super strange for us, but it's things that people would consider to be strange. Or when we mention it, oftentimes the reaction that we initially get is, "Really? I had no idea they could do that." And sometimes our response is, well, we didn't either until we trained them to do it. So, yeah, we've ventured out a bit on the working dog side, to say the least.
Can you tell us a little bit about one or two of those examples? Like, I'm curious now.
Yeah, so our first run at it was both of these are conservation dogs. So much like drug dogs and bomb dogs, they're trained to sniff out very specific things. And the process of training them fundamentally is very similar, not exactly the same, but our first one was a dog trained. It was a yellow lab. His name was Trigger, and we trained him to locate guano, bat poop, actually, to be able to locate endangered bat species, a very specific endangered bat species, the Indiana bat, which is found throughout the Appalachian mountain chain here on the East Coast. They are still very much endangered, and conducting surveys for them was super difficult. Not to bore you with it, but it's hard to catch bats in nets when they have sonar capabilities, and they're very small. So we actually trained a dog to find their poop, because when you find their poop, typically if you look straight up, they're going to be nesting in that particular tree. So
I'm going to say, really?
Yeah,
that's cool.
The second example is two dogs we trained. The first one we trained was the first one that we're aware of in the Western Hemisphere. Trained to find bumblebee nests, believe it or not, particularly for alpine bumblebees, for a species of bumblebee out in the Rockies that live above 10,000 feet. So we've since trained another dog, and they've had some pretty good success in operational environments. So they've actually had field success, and we're looking at training a third one for that same group of folks. So yeah, some pretty odd detection dogs, to say the least.
So these people have come up to you and say, hey, we have this need or idea. What do you think? Is it possible? Is that how they approach you for something like that?
Yeah, a lot of times they approach us in that way, or they've reached out to somebody else who's either told them it couldn't be done, or told them maybe it can be done, but we don't know how to do it. And they're, because of their work, they're usually biologists or something like that, and they're pretty committed to their species, and they want to make something happen. So they keep working and keep working and keep working, and they find somebody like us who say, hey, we've never done it before, but we're willing to see if we can make it work. And so far we've been pretty successful with it.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
Yeah.
So hey, people, if there's something different and unique that you wouldn't think a dog could help you with, Highland might be able to help you do it. So that's pretty cool. I like it. So let me ask you this. I am aware of drug dogs, patrol dogs, bomb dogs. I don't know what epic dogs are. Tracking dogs, disaster dogs, cadaver dogs, and cell phone dogs. Would you be willing to take us through that list and tell us a little bit about what they do? And, because a few of them, I don't even know what that would be, like a cell phone dog. Could you talk us through some of that? Tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Our drug dogs and bomb dogs are our most common. Most people are familiar with them. They're seeing them either out in their local community or in an airport, maybe a bus terminal, that sort of thing. So we do a ton of those throughout the year. We honestly do a lot more drug dogs than we do bomb dogs, just because the demand for them is quite a bit higher.
Yeah.
So next, I think on that list was our epic dogs. Those epic dogs are trained to, they're sort of a combination. So they're able to find explosives in book bags, luggage, boxes, stationary items, but also able to locate explosive odor on moving targets. So humans carrying explosives on their person. So those dogs have quite a bit greater capability than your run-of-the-mill bomb dog. Not that bomb dogs are necessarily run-of-the-mill, but your most typical or common explosive detection dog. Again, those epic dogs are capable of finding it on moving people. Those dogs take quite a bit longer to train, and the process for it is pretty complicated.
Yeah. And so the term epic, does that mean anything? Is it?
It's an
where
acronym.
Does that come from?
Yeah, it's an acronym. Okay. It stands for Explosive Plume Interdiction K9.
Okay.
So,
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And we've got, let's see, tracking dogs, which are what you see in some of these stories where maybe somebody goes missing or a hiker or something. Is that what the tracking dog does?
Yeah, typically what we are training, we refer to them as scent discrimination trailing dogs. So they are able to go out, locate human odor, follow it to its source, and then give us some sort of discernible alert or indication that they found a person. So, and that scent discrimination portion is super important to us because we want that dog to follow the path of a singular human and ignore all the other human odors and contaminants along that trail or path. So those dogs, so the scent discrimination trailing is actually something that can be performed by law enforcement dogs or search and rescue. So we see that in both of those two types of dogs. So we use, oftentimes people use very broad terms. We like to get a lot more specific. So when we talk about police or law enforcement dogs, that encompasses a variety of different types of dogs. As you mentioned, the patrol dogs, the bomb dogs, drug dogs. And a lot of those dogs also do scent discrimination trailing. When we talk about search and rescue dogs, again, pretty general term that describes or encompasses a great number of different types of dogs. So in that you've got a scent discrimination trailing dog, you've got what we call a air scenting or a wilderness search and rescue dog, and then you've got a variety of cadaver dogs. So the cadaver dogs are able to find decomp on land, inside buildings, automobiles. The disaster cadaver dogs are sort of specialized in working man-made and natural disasters, airplane crashes, collapsed buildings, hurricanes, mudslides, those sorts of things. And then probably the most specialized of all cadaver dogs is a water cadaver dog. And those are specifically trained to work and find decomposition in aquatic environments. And that requires a substantial amount of work.
Is it a matter of, is there scent or ability to, is there sense, are they more sensitive to smell than maybe another dog, or is it a matter of training?
It's all a matter of training. We get a lot of questions about olfactory sensitivities and, which dog has the best nose. We always get two questions. What's the smartest dog? And then the other question is, which dog has the best nose? So the question about which dog has the best nose or the best olfactory ability really is almost irrelevant. We know that, certain breeds, the bloodhound, for example, with its long nose and muzzle, it's historically been used to locate humans, fleeing prisoners, that sort of thing over the years. It has a remarkable olfactory setup built into its head. But the reality is it's sort of overkill, because what we're asking these dogs to do simply doesn't require them to work at their full capacity, so to speak. We only need a fraction of it. So because of that, with proper training, what we believe is that even Labradors, German Shepherds, and a variety of other breeds that probably have far fewer olfactory receptors can do just as good a job as those dogs that have really a lot more than what they really need to bring to the table.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have known that. That's good to know. And so, two questions. First one, you were mentioning the snout or the long nose.
Yeah.
That's a sign of a stronger ability to, or a better olfactory sensitivity to? Is that what you're saying, the longer the nose?
Well, we find that longer snout is pretty common in hound breeds, right? And we know that those hound breeds, not just bloodhounds, but a variety of hounds, have just mathematically they have more olfactory receptors than many of the other breeds. Certain breeds are not going to be suitable. Your Pekingese or your Chinese pug with those smushed in faces and very few olfactory receptors. It's not that they can't smell, it's just that they're just not really suited for that type of work.
Yeah. You've kind of gone into this a little bit. That's one of the questions I had. So hounds are a big a dog that's identified as, by most people as one that would fit into this profession. I guess I'm going to call it that. What other dogs do you typically see come in? Or I don't know if people bring the dogs in or you guys search out the dogs. However that process works, but what types of dogs do you usually see come into your school?
So to answer your question, we do it both ways. Meaning that individuals who already have a dog can bring them to us and we'll train them, as long as when we perform an initial evaluation on the dog has the proper drives, temperament, aptitude, and suitability to do the work. If they do, we'll train their dog. If they don't, then obviously we can't fit a square peg in a round hole. Majority of the time we're providing the dog and the training. So we're procuring dogs from a variety of sources. A lot of dogs that we get come from Europe. I'm actually getting ready to go to Europe in a couple days and pick up some dogs and bring them back for both breeding and training. So what breeds do we typically see in that type of work? We've seen a lot of different breeds have the ability and aptitude for that type of work. But the more common breeds, honestly, are the Belgian Malinois, German Shepherd. Most people can't tell the difference between those two, but they're very different dogs, very different breeds. And then we use a lot of sporting breeds too, and we're seeing a little bit of a shift in trends where a lot of people are moving a little more to those sporting breeds. Labrador retrievers, golden retrievers, German short-haired pointers.
That's interesting. Okay. Cool. Let's see here. Is the training much different between a tracking dog and a cadaver dog? And that's my first question. And my second question, is there any cross-training? Will a dog have and be able to be used for multiple functions, or is that not the best way to use the dogs?
Okay, so first question, training. Training's fundamentally different, depending on what we're doing. So there's a lot of overlap in detection, for example. So if you came to our place here in North Carolina and you spent 3 days and you watched us train drug dogs one day, bomb dogs the next day, and cadaver dogs the third day, and we've got all three in training right now, you may, depending on what stage of training we're at, you may not be able to tell the difference. So again, there's a lot of overlap. However,
Sure.
there's also a ton of differences in not only the way that we approach the training of each dog, but there are also some pretty big variations in the way that we set up problems for those dogs. Right? So when I began to really sort of throw some problems at our bomb dogs, I'm going to have them searching large areas. We're going to go to maybe a huge warehouse, a stadium, a crowded venue. My drug dogs, I'm gonna have them out on the interstate with tractor trailers buzzing by their head, sniffing cars on the side of the road. These cadaver dogs, I'm probably gonna have out in wooded areas near a stream or creek or something similar, looking for decomp that's either buried or hidden some other way. So there's this, again, a lot of fundamentals are very similar in the beginning, but pretty quickly you start to see them separate through the balance of their training program while they're here.
Gotcha. So in my mind, I'm envisioning the trunk of the training is maybe the same, and then it branches out after that. Okay.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, that's really a good way to put it. A lot of similarities in the beginning. A lot of similarities as well in our initial testing of these dogs. A lot of those qualities that we're looking for are the same across the board. Whether this dog's going to end up being a drug dog, a bomb dog, or a cadaver dog, scent discrimination, trailing, whatever the case may be, there's a lot of overlap in those assets or abilities that this dog is sort of bringing to the equation initially.
Yeah. It is a question I think I had a little further down, but I was curious because you kind of brought it up. You screen the dogs or do some early determination. Can you talk about that? Not in super detail, but just, generally help our folks understand what that really means. Like, do you bring 5 dogs in and you say, hey, let's try this, let's try that? Is it fun for them? What does that look like if I were to watch that? Well,
to answer the second part of that question first, because I think that's the most important thing, everything's fun to them. We got this whole thing wrong because we call these drug dogs and bomb dogs and cadaver, we call them working dogs because to us they look like they're working. The reality is they're not really working. They're playing. This whole thing is a big game of hide and seek. Yeah, the whole thing's a big game of hide and seek in large part for them. They enjoy the testing process. They enjoy the training process, and then in the operational environment, again, it's all a big game. When we look at it sort of in a grand scheme of things, it's all just a big game for them. It looks serious. It is serious. The outcome can be incredibly serious, but the dog doesn't understand any of that, and for them, they're just doing what genetically they were designed over thousands of years to do.
That's cool.
So
that is good.
Yeah. So test and selection, it's really complicated. To keep it simple, there are a number of things we look for. Sociability is one. Is this dog social around humans and other animals? Trainability, how eager is it to work with us? Requisite drives. Does it have strong predatory instincts that are useful? Will it hunt for things that are out of sight? So, those are the basics. Environmentals are incredibly important. You can have the best bomb dog in the world, but if it doesn't want to walk up a set of steps or it doesn't work on slick floors, then it's not the best bomb dog in the world. And to be really honest with you, more dogs probably get washed because of environmentals. When I say washed, either not initially selected or pretty quickly washed out of the program because of some environmental issue.
Yeah. So it is possible that some of them come into the program and then so the screening is not perfect in the sense that you screen them perfectly before the training. Some actually get into the training and you're able to determine early on probably that maybe not this one. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'll say that that's pretty uncommon. It happens, but it's pretty rare that it happens because, and here's why it's pretty rare, because we've got a pretty rigorous testing program. Two, we're testing adult dogs, so we're not going out here investing a lot initially in puppies and young dogs. These dogs are about a year old, somewhere between a year and a half old when we're first putting our hands on them, when we're testing them, when we're seeing what they're made of. We do work with some puppies. I don't like it very much because they're such a crapshoot and such a gamble. They can a lot can change with young dogs and puppies in a real short period of time. So that can be a huge investment for a dog that just doesn't have it later on in their life, when they get to be a year old. So we like to start with dogs that most people consider to be a little older. But that's sort of standard process here in the U.S. Even globally, to start with dogs somewhere between 1 and 2 years old.
Does make sense. Makes a lot of sense. The capabilities to do more than one task, I think that was part of a question I had, was we talked about the training now, the end result. Is there any cross-functional ability with the dog, or are they pretty specialized and stay in one lane?
Back to that part of the question. In a perfect world, the perfect world for trainers and most everybody would be to have a dog do a singular job. The reality of that, however, is we don't see a lot of those. Going back sort of that bloodhound and talking about, its greater capacity for olfaction and processing, it's there. And it's kind of a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy with those bloodhounds in that oftentimes they are much better at finding people than some of the other breeds. It's not because they're more capable. It's not because they have greater olfactory ability. It's because that's all they do and that's all they're good at. A lot of these other dogs, what we would call in the industry a dual dog or a dual-purpose dog, that dog may be dual in that it does trailing, just like that bloodhound, but it also does drug detection. Right? So now that handler has to divide his allotted training time between two skills, where the bloodhound handler gets the same allotted amount of time, but they only have to focus on one thing. And obviously they're just going to be better. They're going to be better at it. And then when you get into those dual patrol dogs, so now you've got a guy who's doing the same allotted time. He's training patrol functions, drug detection, and trailing, and lots of other things. So now his time's really, really divided up. And if we're not careful, they can kind of struggle in one area. A lot of those dogs we see have one area they're super good at, and then they have oftentimes at least one skill that they're quite a bit weaker on.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some of the common challenges you guys face when training these dogs, and how do you overcome them? Is it pretty streamlined in the sense that you said it's fun, which I think actually would probably make the training easier. But let me ask you that question. Is there challenges there that you guys have to work through with some dogs?
You're going to encounter challenges with the dogs. You will, through the process. Some are a little too eager and you have to slow them down. Some of them, the Malinois, I tell a lot of people, I don't know if you're familiar or very familiar with Belgian Malinois, but they've been used by law enforcement and military now for a number of decades. They're, again, even though they've been around a few decades, pretty strong, they're still sort of new to the industry, so to speak. They, by some report or study a couple years ago, somebody did a study on what's the smartest dog in the world, and somehow they concluded in this study that it was in fact the Belgian Malinois. How they came to that conclusion, I have absolutely no idea, because Malinois are remarkable creatures. They're very good at what they do. They're excellent, but they're pretty dumb in the same sense. Or can be, and and you know, sometimes with those dogs it just requires a ton of repetition. They get a little overzealous. A lot of people refer to them as a German Shepherd on meth, and that's a pretty accurate description of them, to be honest with you. They can be a absolute handful, those dogs. So you'll run into some issues with that. They're very linear, very binary. It's super black and white with Malinois. They're not very forgiving if you make mistakes and errors with them sometimes. So you'll run into a few challenges with those dogs from time to time. The big challenge in the whole process has nothing to do with the dogs. It's that human element that can be incredibly tough. I tell my students all the time, dogs are easy, people are hard. And in this line of work, working with people and training people is where you earn your money. Training the dogs is the easy part. Training the people is the hard part. So
that's interesting.
Dogs don't come with biases. They don't come with complaints. They don't have their own opinions and ideas about things, and they'll never argue with you. So,
well, I'm going to go there in a little bit because I do want to know more about the dog versus handler and how that whole dynamic works. But that's a little bit later on. Before we go there, I want to ask you this: do you have, and can you share, a memorable success story about a dog? Maybe it was difficult and you had great success with it, or just one that you or your team fell in love with because they just something special about one of those animals. Is there anyone like that you can remember, or for your team, anybody experience something like that?
Yeah, I mean there's tons of them. I'll get in trouble for saying one's better than the other.
But it sounds like does your team really get attached to some of these dogs?
Oh yeah.
Before they go?
Oh yeah. They can. Yeah, they really can. And that's a challenge I face, is trying to navigate that and help them navigate that sometimes. You know, we put all this effort, we put all this work into it, and the main goal is to go see that dog go do and perform what we spent all this time and effort to make happen.
Yeah.
And that's where the real success is that dog in that operational environment, doing the work that you put in all the blood, sweat, tears, and hours to teach it to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, there's tons and tons and tons of success stories. Dogs finding drugs, dogs intercepting contraband. But I'll be honest with you, some of the more rewarding ones are when those dogs find missing children or dementia and Alzheimer's patients who've been walked off for, sometimes 2 days, 3 days, and you find them tired, hungry, down by a creek 6-7 miles away from home, and you're able to bring them back to their family alive. Those stories don't oftentimes make the paper, like the 16 kilo drug bust on the interstate, or something like that. But I will tell you that those stories can be just as, if not more so, rewarding than some of those pretty substantial drug busts and stuff.
Yeah, I totally can see that. That's a under the radar, powerful task that they did right there, and maybe people won't even know about it.
Yep.
Yeah. Preparing a dog for the real life scenario. You kind of touched on it a little bit. So I'm believing that through the training program that you have, you introduce them, like you mentioned about the dog on next to the highway by tractor trailers driving by. So you guys introduce them into real world distracting type scenarios. That's part of their training, correct?
Yeah, that's a super important part of that training that we have to make sure happens before they're paired with a handler. And that training has to continue as well, but yes.
Yeah. That's my next question, is the role, what role does the dog handler play in the training? Is there training of the dog and then the training of the handler as well, or is there a training when they both come together? What does that look like?
It looks different depending on who you're working with. I'll tell you, it's done both ways. So there are organizations, law enforcement organizations, and private vendors like us out there who will bring in that new dog, untrained dog, and they'll bring in that new untrained handler sometimes, and they'll try to train them together, or they will train them together. That training period is often pretty lengthy. We prefer not to do it that way. We find that for us it's more successful to bring that dog in, train it, and all of its training is done by the hands of somebody who has a lot of experience to be able to identify those mistakes and mitigate those quickly and ensure that dog's learning the right way. And then when all of that's done, at that point we bring in the handler. And then we train that handler alongside that dog for a period of time, and then they go back to their respective community and start work. So it's done both ways, but we prefer to do it where the dog's what we call pre-trained, and then we do a handler school.
Yeah. So as you're talking about that, my next question came up to my mind, which is, so you have this whole process of training. When the handler and the dog leaves, is there a protocol for ongoing training remotely with those two? Like, does the handler then work continually with certain situations with that dog to keep them sharp? Is that part of the process?
Yeah, so they're required to conduct a minimum amount of training every month. So the sort of federally mandated accepted minimum is 16 hours a month. Now again, that's a minimum, but they've got to get at least 16 hours a month, and that's where, sort of backtracking a little bit, I was talking about that hound. It gets to spend 16 hours a month just doing one thing, whereas other teams may have to split that 16 hours amongst a variety of different skills. So they oftentimes are allotted that 16 hours a month, so that handler has to get that in. Good handlers are getting more than 16 hours. I'll just be honest with you. They are. They're committed to making it work, so they're gonna get out there and go to other classes and seminars and more advanced training when it's available to them. So that continued maintenance training is for the life of the dog. So it's, as long as those two are paired together, that has to continue to keep that dog's skills sharp and keep that handler skills sharp.
Yeah. Now this is probably a silly question because it seems pretty straightforward, but let's say a police officer that is paired with a dog, that's why, right? That those two are partners almost, right? Because the time that they spend together is probably pretty critical, I'm assuming. Is that right?
Yeah. The time they spend together is critical. The relationship that they develop is the most important thing. Yeah, they're gonna spend a lot of time together. In many cases, they're in the same car, going to the same calls and eating together, training together, playing together. So there's a lot of time that handler's going to be spending with that dog, and vice versa. Most of them, about probably more than 95% of them, probably live at home. The police dogs live at home with their handler, with their family. So, the reality is oftentimes these handlers are spending more time with these dogs than they are their own family, because they're seeing them at home and at work.
Yeah. Wow, that's pretty cool. And so I think that answers the question I had. I was wondering, is there usually 2 or 3 handlers with one dog? Or is it usually one-on-one, right?
Yeah, it's 1-to-1. We've done a few over the years. It's very rare where there were multiple handlers. It's generally not the best situation. One handler, one dog is almost always the best, an ideal situation.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a 2-part question. Let me look at it real quick because it's kind of long. I wrote
Okay.
this a couple days back. It says here, what does the path look like for someone who wants to work with these dogs? So it's a 2-part question. Are they all police and law enforcement, or are there people like cadaver dogs or search dogs that it's a civilian that works with these dogs? Is it a combination? I'm just curious, is it always just law enforcement that has these dogs?
No, not at all. And it really depends on the type of dog you're talking about. So we do get this question a lot because, again, as I mentioned earlier, we do operate a school for dog trainers, and we get people who come to school and they're like, I want to be a dog trainer, but I want to learn to train police dogs, or I want to learn to train cadaver dogs. I'm not a cop. You've never been a cop. Is this something I can still do? And the answer is yes. I would speculate that a majority of the people in the industry who are professionally training working dogs are not cops. They're not law enforcement. Most of your handlers for police dogs are handlers or detection dogs. But there are lots of civilian jobs out there right now for people with bomb and drug dogs who may or may not have had any prior law enforcement type of experience. Those dogs are screening public and private schools for drugs. They're working, they're private companies that work a lot of your arenas and stadiums and public transit and those sorts of things. So no, you don't have to be law enforcement. Now, when we talk about the search and rescue side of things, an overwhelming majority of those handlers for your disaster dogs, your urban and wilderness search and rescue, your cadaver dogs, overwhelming majority of those people are not only civilians but civilian volunteers.
Okay. Yeah, and I the reason why I said is because I remember watching movies in the past. I can't remember what movies, where you see this older fella in overalls coming up and saying "go" to, and he sends his dogs out. So I'm thinking that guy doesn't look like a cop. So yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, there's everything from private security companies that have pointy-eared patrol dogs to, like I said, your local community rescue squad or search and rescue group that has trailing or cadaver dogs. And again, a lot of those folks are in fact volunteers. They're doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They have little to no financial backing. So it's kind kind of a weird industry, to be honest with you, because but again, we also train cadaver dogs for law enforcement. The one we've got right now, that's coming up in this next school, is for a law enforcement agency out of Florida. We do a lot of EMAs across the country, emergency management agencies, that we train search and rescue, trailing cadaver dogs for. But again, we also do it for civilians as well.
Yeah. So if somebody, this was the second part of the question, which as I look at it now, they're not really the same question. But the question the second part is, if somebody were interested in being a trainer and they came to you, like, what is the criteria to qualify them for training specialized dogs like this?
Knowledge and experience. That's what you got to have. Other than that, there are no real prerequisites. I mean, there are a lot of qualities that are going to make successful professional trainers, whether it be service dogs, police dogs, search and rescue dogs, or pet dogs. You know, they got to have a super strong work ethic. They've got to have a learning mindset. They need formal education, and they need a lot of experience to be really good at it. And unfortunately, there's just, and I tell people this all the time, unfortunately, there's no substitute for experience. Good experience. So, other than that, can you be a professional police dog trainer and never have been in law enforcement? Yeah, the reality is you can. I've got some folks that work for me who do a bang-up job. They've trained hundreds of police teams. My working dog division historically has been managed and spearheaded by female trainers. Younger, I say younger, in their they started when they were in their early 20s, and for years ran my working dog division and did a tremendous job. They've never been law enforcement, never been cops, but man, they can train a dog and they can train handlers.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure there are going to be people that listen to this that just love dogs and are thinking, man, I would really like to know what that path is. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
The transition from the dog being trained to its handler and the working environment, you kind of went through it. Can you just give us an example of, like, okay, this dog's been trained for 6 weeks, now you come for a week and then you go. Is it something like that?
Sort of. So the dogs are trained 16 to 20 weeks on average. Some longer depending on what skill set they're going to have. And then that handler is generally here for a month. So they're usually here for 4 weeks. But prior to coming here, they go through all of our lectures virtually from the comfort of their police car on their laptop. So they get the chance to do that at their own pace prior to coming. Saves us a lot of time here, and we get to just do a lot of the hands-on training with them while they're here. So they're here for 4 weeks, usually, sometimes a little more, depending on how things are going. The dog's fully trained when they get here. Now it's our job. We've sort of built the race car. Now we just need to teach them how to drive it. It's a little more complicated than that because we're dealing with two biological creatures who have to connect, and they have to have a significant, productive relationship, and that sometimes can be the hard part. It really can, because you're dealing with cops, and they can struggle sometimes with relationships. They can struggle sometimes with getting feedback and constructive criticism. So it can be a challenge. I'm not going to say we've mastered it over the past 30 years, but we've definitely gotten a lot better at it. We have a tremendous amount of success in those handler education programs, and really we feel like that is the most critical part of making that team work. Making any team work out is going to be a huge emphasis on making sure that that handler education portion is done right. In order to, sort of ensure the success, long-term success of those two when they leave. And that's what you got to be committed to.
Yeah. That's good. An investment on both sides and connecting them together. That's right.
Yeah, it's a marriage.
Right. Especially like you were saying, if they're, and sometimes they're living with them and everything like that, that's going to be a strong bond in many cases, which is great, actually. So,
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, if done right, you're going to have a pretty incredible relationship there where those two are bonded. It's a lot of work. I mean, I think a lot of people look at canine handlers and that canine job, and it's cool, and you get to work with a dog all day, but it's also a lot of work. I mean, it really is.
Yeah. One question came to my mind as we were talking. I'm curious a little bit about the capability of the scent. So, it's amazing to me that a dog can walk around the outside of a vehicle and pick up a scent, or know to go this way or that way to follow the trail of somebody who walked off in the woods. What is the distance and capability of that? Or are they picking up scents here and there as they go? I'm just curious because it just seems like amazing to me that they're able to just find a scent, like I said, walking around a vehicle or something. Is it strong enough that they can really tell quite a distance away?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, dogs can smell in parts per trillion. Yeah, and the way that's been explained to me before that sort of resonated is like that's the ability to smell a drop of something in an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because if it looks like that from the outside looking in, it's amazing.
Yeah, if it's done right, I mean, if the training's done right and the initial foundation is set correctly, I mean, their work is, they work in some pretty tough environments, but I mean, the olfactory part of it's, for them, again, it's a big game, and their ability, I mean, you're talking, we talk about detection, we're talking about dogs that can follow human paths for long periods of time that have been left for long periods of time before they were ever presented with that path. We're talking about dogs, as you said, that can find odor emanating from an automobile, from the bottom of a lake, from 10 or more feet buried underground. It's just, and drug dealers and terrorists are great at concealing and masking these odors. I mean, that's what they do, is they move contraband from A to B, and they're going to get as creative as they can be to ensure that they don't get caught with it. And the reality is there's just no way to get past a well-trained detection dog.
Wow. That's great, actually. That is pretty cool.
Yeah, they're hard to beat.
So we've talked about, and you've taught us a lot about this. I really am very thankful because a lot of my questions, or all of my questions, have been answered. I was curious, talk to us a little bit about your business. Anything new coming up? Anything that's going on? Would you like to share anything about your company with the audience?
Well, nothing major. Like I said, early on, we're always busy. We don't really have a slow time. We're open in new locations throughout the country. We've got a new location just opened up in Denver. We're excited about a new location in New York as well that we've just just opened up, so we do have trainers not only here in North Carolina, but we've got trainers throughout the U.S., Pacific Northwest, Texas. We've got, like I said, 3 campuses at our school. We've got one in Texas, one in Alabama, and one here in North Carolina. So, and we're hoping to expand that here in the next few years, and hopefully offer a school strictly in Spanish, somewhere in a Spanish-speaking country, for those folks who want to become dog trainers, but are native Spanish speakers. So, you know, our school for dog trainers, we've had folks come from 37 or 38 different countries now. We currently have students here, one from Mexico, one from South Africa. So in the last class we had one from the Emirates, and you know, we've had them from lots of different places in the world. So, you know, being a dog trainer seems like a cool job, and the reason why it seems like a cool job is because it really is. But it is a lot of work. I will say that it requires a commitment, huge commitment. Again, it's not all puppy breath. You know, especially when you're training police dogs, you can get your hands full pretty quick. So, but for those people who want to learn more, or for those people who might be interested in becoming a professional dog trainer, you know, go find a trainer, and you know, see if they'll let you shadow with them and see what they do and see if it's a good fit for you. I would encourage people to be more involved with dogs, because it really is a cool profession.
Yeah, that's cool. As we get towards the end of the interview here, I want to see if there's anything else. You mentioned multiple locations. Are they all going to be called Highland K9, or will they be called different things? Okay.
Yeah, they're all branded.
People are looking for you. Okay. So they'll know to look for Highland K9, whether it's in Texas or Colorado or whatever. Yeah, that's great.
All branded the same. Yeah.
And yeah, I was going to ask how you saw things evolving over the next few years, but you've talked about that. You're going to expand. You're going to meet the demand out there, and that's your plan. So that's cool. Yeah.
That's the game plan.
All right. Yeah, it's a good one. That is awesome. Is there anything about any of your team members you want to share? Is there anybody there or that you want to give a shout out to?
Well, yeah, all of them, because they put in the work. I mean, they really do. These folks, they keep coming in every day. They keep putting in the work. They keep innovating. I mean, that's one of the great things about our business. We do and have done a ton of research. You know, getting into detection dogs. I'm very passionate about detection, whether it be drug dogs, bomb dogs, cadaver, bumblebees. We're hoping to go after sea turtles next, actually, and develop a new program to be able to be more efficient with sea turtles. But you know, these folks come in. Not only are they putting in the work, they're innovating. They're thinking of new ideas and new ways to make this industry better. Not only make my business better, but to make my industry better, make our industry better. You know, how do we build a better police dog? You know, we've done tons and tons of research, all been self-funded. We're not getting money from the government. We're not getting grants. We're paying for it because there are fundamental questions that need to be answered in order to make better police dogs and better bomb dogs and better drug dogs. And we've got a great team of people here who come into work every day, and really that is their mission to really sort of raise the bar in this industry, and you know, create a situation where we're constantly evolving and raising that standard.
That's great. Yeah, the passion and desire to perfect that and make it better and better. That's awesome. Quick question I just thought of right now. as a trainer, what's a typical schedule will look like for them? Are they 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, or is it all over the place?
In large part, it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. That's pretty much the schedule for my working dog trainers. My pet dog trainers a little different. They're a little more flexible. They may not have dogs and clients in the morning, but they may be working until 7, 8 o'clock at night, right, in people's homes. My service dog trainers they're usually 8 to 5, but they can get some odd hours too from time to time, because when we train these dogs, we deliver them. So we deliver them worldwide, and they go to these folks' homes, and they're there with them all day. For 5-6 days in a row sometimes, so they can get some goofy hours and long weekends. So it's pretty demanding. Yeah.
Well, as we get ready to wrap up here, is there any question that you're going, man, I cannot believe he didn't ask this. This is the most important thing. Is there anything like that?
No, I don't think so. There's some questions we oftentimes get when we're talking working dogs. One is, what do you use to train cadaver dogs? We get that one a lot. And I will say, historically, we have used human body parts in order to effectively train those dogs. We're fortunate enough to have an alternative, a good chemically formulated alternative to it. We use a product that we've been using now for more than a decade. It's called Scent Logics, and it's a chemically formulated alternative to our drugs and explosives and now cadaver. that gives us an opportunity to be a little more versatile. But yeah, for years we used real body parts, real human bone, flesh, hair, teeth, blood. It surprises people to hear that. They always ask the question expecting that answer, but then when you give them that answer, they always seem surprised. So they're like, "No, really?" Like, yeah, you knew that was going to be the answer when you asked the question. So, but we get that question a lot. We're often questioned about different types of breeds and what breed's the best, and the reality is the best breed depends on the situation. So. There's no one dog that's going to be the best for every situation. So, but other than that, no, I think you covered all the bases.
Yeah, you answered some great questions for me, and I'm glad you threw in that last one there, because I would have thought of that later and went, darn it, I didn't ask him that, because it is one of those things that you go, hey, what do they use? Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, we get that one a lot.
Well, as we wrap up here, how can people find you? On my on the show, there'll be some links at the bottom. But if people forget and they're not on my show at that time, what's the best way for them to find you, your website, and to just look at what you're doing going forward?
Our website's highlandk9.com. It's super easy to find on just about any browser. We're also on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram. You can find us on LinkedIn, TikTok. We're pretty much on every platform. So, and they all have a little different content to offer. So, yeah, if people are curious or interested, definitely check us out there as well. Our phone number and email links are all on our website, so we're pretty easy to track down.
Perfect. That's awesome. Well, Jason, it's been great. I learned a lot today. I hope the audience gets their fill as well, because there's a lot of good information you shared with us. So many things I didn't know enough about when it came to this area and these animals, and you've helped me see things. So I really am thankful for that. I appreciate that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much. So as we wrap up today, I just want to say to the audience, remember, there's a lot of strange and unexpected out there. And so always keep your eyes, ears, and minds open. And until next time, stay safe.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.